Good afternoon, everyone. Josh is Severe Weather. Happy Thursday to you. I hope everybody is safe from Hurricane Milton. That storm made landfall last night around 8:30 p.m. near Sarasota, Siesta Key. Made a little bit of that right wobble at the very end that saved some of the areas of Tampa Bay from more storm surge, but still a destructive storm. And fortunately, is moving offshore, and we are going to see things quieting down and some cooler weather coming in from the northwest here in the wake of the storm this week. But we may not be finished yet with the tropics. I hate to say it at this point, but we're going to start to see potentially a pattern for another system in the Caribbean later next week. And I'm going to talk about that later in this video. I do want to wrap up what's been going on with Milton first before we get to that point here, but we are going to take a look at that here as well in this video. So thank you so much for joining me. Here is a look at the potential for the area to form next week here, probably later in the week, somewhere close to Central America and in the Western Caribbean. At this point, way too soon to make any kind of bold predictions. The storm is not formed, and it probably has another week before it may form, assuming it even does that. And that's certainly something that we're going to have to wait and see on. I know there have been some things going through social media talking about how this one will be Hurricane Nadine hitting Florida, blah, blah, blah. It's just way too soon to make a call like that, and I'm not here to get the hype machine cranking up and scare you yet. I just think it's something we need to be watching a little bit more closely as the pattern does favor something else. But the pattern in New England favors snow. We've got Mount Washington closed today, several inches of snow and driving winds. Winter is not that far away for us here in the Northeast here. So just wanted to share that with you here before we talk about Florida. So here's what's going on with Milton. And you can see the center of the storm is moving well to the east of the Space Coast over here in Florida and passing by Abaco and Grand Bahama. They're getting some tropical storm force winds across this area here, but we should see conditions improving as we get into the late afternoon and evening hours. The system is beginning to become post-tropical, starting to lose that warm central core inside due to the much cooler air that's rushing in here with a cold front that's pushing southward here. And that is going to weaken our storm significantly as it continues to pull away from the southeast today and into the night tonight. A lot of you in Florida still do not have power. As of lunchtime today, we've got about 30% of the state that does not have power, especially the Gulf Coast counties, but even counties we haven't talked a lot about, Hardy and Highlands County, both of you are pretty much without power completely, while the Bay Area has a lot of power outages. Hillsborough County, Pinellas County, Manatee are about 70 to 80% without electricity. Sarasota right behind here, about 70% of you without electricity. And Charlotte and parts of southwestern Georgia is without, or southwestern Florida, not Georgia, sorry. Think it's still of Helene here a couple weeks ago, are still without power. Collier County, about half of you do not have electricity. We got hit pretty hard as well across the rest of Central Florida. Polk County, about half of you are without power. Lake County, more than half without power. Orlando kind of dodged the worst of this, but we have significant power outages still in the Orlando area, about half of you without power. And at the coast here, more than half of you are without power. So it's going to be several days here. We need to be patient on the process as we continue to see that power being restored. And we still have power outages in the mountains of North Carolina, still very bad there, even more than 2 weeks after Helene has hit. We still have half of Mitchell and Yancey County without power. Asheville, Buncombe area still have about maybe a quarter of you that do not have electricity. So we do want to take a look at the storm surge. And I'll tell you what here, this could have been much worse if this track had been about 40 miles to the north and west. It would have brought the strongest storm surge into Tampa Bay, which is very vulnerable. But it was pretty bad in the Fort Myers area, Charlotte County, and parts of Sarasota. You can see here, we had major flooding here during the height of the storm last night at Fort Myers. So surge flooding there, certainly worse than predicted. But fortunately, we're going to see that improving. In the Tampa Bay area, Port Manatee, we avoided what could have been a very worst case scenario. And we're very fortunate for that. From a storm surge perspective, we still had the wind, we still had the rain, certainly, but we missed out on the storm surge. And on the East Coast, we definitely have had some flooding as well at Port Canaveral and up the coast as well. We've seen some high amounts of surge, creating some minor flooding here, all the way into the St. John River near Jacksonville, some minor flooding. So the surge very much could have been a lot worse, and we're fortunate that it's not, based on the little bit of a jog to the right and the weakening that happened. But I tell you what, the state of Florida had never seen a tornado outbreak like it did yesterday. 133 tornado warnings were issued and multiple reports of tornadoes. The Miami office here has confirmed at least 5 tornadoes. Perhaps there'll be more, and they are going to be doing storm surveys. The Melbourne office will also be doing storm surveys, but very hard hit in parts of Palm Beach County, as well as inland Broward County, Glades County, Hendry County, and that's just from Miami. We had multiple reports farther north as well in St. Lucie County and in Martin counties here of significant damage. So even fatalities and injuries. So even though the hurricane was well to your west, we had the right dynamics for tornadoes to form. And I suspect of these 45 tornado reports, we are going to have some stronger EF2, EF3, maybe even EF4 level tornadoes. Which in the state of Florida is pretty much unheard of. If we do get a few strong tornadoes, they're typically in the wintertime as the jet stream dips south. To see this many in the fall is certainly an extreme case. So as far as our wind speeds, we had gusts that were over 100 miles per hour in the Tampa Bay area, Bradenton, Sarasota, all the way to Anna Maria, where the high gust was 106 miles per hour. And 107 miles per hour in Venice. Even though the eye dried out, we still had the powerful winds as our storm made landfall here last night. But we are fortunate, though, that these numbers were not any higher than that. Also seeing some high numbers on the East Coast here. In fact, the strongest ones I've seen are 92 miles per hour near Playa Linda Beach. That's just north of the Kennedy Space Center there. 87 miles per hour on some of the launch pads here at the Space Center, 92 as well. And Daytona Beach, a gust to 87 miles per hour. Vero Beach, 84 miles per hour. So a lot of folks had hurricane force conditions, albeit on the lower end at this point. Melbourne International, 78 miles per hour overnight. Cocoa Beach, almost 80 miles per hour. Orlando International Airport, which was shut down with 86 mile per hour winds just after midnight. And Daytona, 78 miles per hour. So a lot of hurricane force winds out of this system. But the good news is that it is now moving away. You can see how the track varied. We had a little bit of wobbling to the right and some wobbling to the left. But I think the main thing that caught me personally by surprise was the fact that the storm did not slow down as fast as it looked like it might. Most of our models had the landfall time right around or just after midnight. The storm came in about 4 or 5 hours sooner at about 8:30 p.m. And even though the storm did hit some wind shear and some slightly cooler water, it still held together pretty good and hit as a Category 3. But then the storm continued to move pretty quickly, and it was already off the coast this morning by 5 in the morning, and now well off the coast. We just have some leftover clouds and some strong winds still at the coast, which are already starting to diminish, as you can see here. We do still have a tropical storm warning from basically the low country of South Carolina down to the Treasure Coast. I think this will be expiring here as we get later into the afternoon. And we've got a tropical storm warning for the far northwestern Bahamas, including Freeport. But you can see the hurricane force winds on this system are not very large. It is down to 80 miles per hour. But the tropical storm force winds continues to grow. This is not quite as big as Helene was, but it's up there, a very big storm at this point due to that wind shear, allowing the winds to expand out from the center more significantly, weakening the storm, but allowing it to become bigger. And as the storm approaches Bermuda here later on tomorrow afternoon and evening, we could see winds close to tropical storm force. But at this point, the system will be weakening and it will be losing its tropical storm characteristics. So Bermuda is not officially under a tropical storm watch or warning. This is nothing like what we saw with Ernesto here a couple of months ago. Here is a look at our forecast model, and it shows this the GFS model showing the pressure climbing significantly here from near 990 millibars up to 1,004 millibars. So basically a post-tropical system. We also have what's Hurricane Leslie out here, which will weaken as well. You can see Bermuda will have the heaviest rains moving in overnight tonight, and the rain should let up in the morning tomorrow. So about a 12-hour period of some rain in Bermuda. Maybe a couple of inches will fall. But this system here, the future is looking pretty grim. It's just going to kind of linger here as just a little bit of a low-pressure system, but really nothing of great concern at this point. Here's a look at the wind gust forecast for Bermuda. And you can see here, winds may gust up to about 43 kilometers per hour. That's only about maybe just shy of 30 miles per hour, 25 to 30. So you're going to miss out on most of the wind here as the system pulls away to the south and east, and much quieter this weekend across Florida and the northern Bahamas. We may see a front move through here towards the middle of next week when winds should start to pick back up just a little bit. Here's a look at our tropical model real fast for you just to be able to see how this system is going to very quickly decay. Most of the rain is going to be well in advance of the system, not much behind it. And you can see the wind field, while big, is going to continue to diminish here over the next couple of days, and not much of a system left over by the weekend here, fortunately. So that is a look at Milton. Let's take a look at the rest of the tropics before we talk about our next potential system. Here we go with Milton, and you can see a lot of dry air on the western side here. All of the moisture and convection is east of you. We do have what was potentially going to be a system, but never really formed a true core, moving away from Bermuda, which is right here. That will continue in this direction. No threat to land. We've got Hurricane Leslie, which is now getting more wind shear and beginning to weaken finally after that second push. And we've got a wave out in the eastern Atlantic, which has a 20% chance of developing. It's going to take some time to do so. But overall, things are looking a lot quieter here, as you might expect, for the middle of the month of October. And here are the storms on the map, just Milton and Leslie at this point. And our 20% area that we need to keep an eye on. But according to the Hurricane Center, and I do agree with this, the window for this to even become a tropical depression or storm is fairly small. It would be probably tomorrow. As we get to the weekend, we are going to see an increase in wind shear and some drier air around the system, which will keep it from developing and probably weaken it. So just some heavy rain coming for the Cabo Verde Islands here, probably late tonight into the day tomorrow, but that's really about it. And if we look at the rest of the Atlantic and the world, you can see here pretty good flare-up of storms coming off the coastline. This is the area it could develop. This is Invest 94L. This is Hurricane Leslie. It was a Category 2 last night, but now beginning to weaken, and it is going to recurve and follow Kirk here towards the Azores. Winds about 40 miles per hour for the beginning of next week, and then eventually that heads towards Portugal, Spain, and France, just like we saw with Kirk. Here is the track of Milton, which will be post-tropical here by tonight. Winds will diminish significantly. And on the Pacific side, we are no longer expecting development of our system over here, moving away from Cabo San Lucas. There is an area in here that is going to start to flare up in a few days that we'll probably have to keep an eye on. Across the rest of the world, pretty quiet. We just have one system east of Japan moving into cooler water, and that is Tropical Storm Barajat, and that is going to become post-tropical here by tomorrow morning. Here's a quick look at Leslie, much smaller looking. You can see it's exposed here. The center is on the northern side of our thunderstorm development, kind of a naked half swirl here, all of our thunderstorm development here. And the reason why is we've got strong wind shear hitting it from the north, from a combination of yesterday's Invest and an approaching front and Milton. All three are going to cause this system to weaken significantly. Here is the forecast. It goes into cooler waters. It weakens to a tropical storm overnight tonight, and then a post-tropical storm towards the second portion of this upcoming weekend. So that is it until we talk about the next one. Now, I'm going to talk about the setup here. We're not going to make forecasts just yet. We're just going to look at what might pop up. This is the GFS ensemble. It shows in the browns here what we call very unfavorable divergence aloft. These are winds aloft that basically do not spread out and allow storms to grow. They create hostile conditions here. But as we head on into the weekend and beginning of next week, you will see that the browns become lighter and lighter here, and we start to see some greens showing up around Central America. This is the potential making of another Central American gyre, which was what caused Helene, and that's what caused Milton. We're not predicting either at this point. We're just predicting the fact that it will become more favorable for some tropical development. And you can see here, by the time we get to next Tuesday, there's pretty good spreading and divergence here in the Southwest Caribbean. Usually to see a storm form, we need to have that, but we also need to have a storm form over the water and not over land. Over land, it could start to form, but we wouldn't have a named system, of course. But there is some window for this to happen here during the week next week, and you'll notice that the Gulf is not going to be super hostile either as we get into next weekend, the 19th and 20th. Beyond that, we are still not super unfavorable at this point for development, but we're not very favorable either. It's kind of a marginal situation here when we get later into the month of October. So taking a look ahead here, we are going to get wet again in the Western Caribbean and around the Florida Keys, above average across this entire area, as what we're going to have is this boundary that hangs out here and gets stuck We've got a dry northwest flow that will provide dry, cooler weather to much of the eastern United States here through the middle of next week. But as we move past that, you will see it turns wetter over both the Northwest Caribbean and the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. And when there's a front camping out over warm water, we obviously need to pay more attention. However, the timeline on this is still about 9-10 days away, so we just can't make a great forecast at this point. But you can see the wetness does build back through Florida. We've had a lot of rain recently, and unfortunately, after several dry days, it gets wetter again from south to north here towards the end of next week and especially the following week of the 21st. And it remains wet across Central America, Mexico, and the southern Gulf of Mexico. And you can see here now the European ensemble from earlier is beginning to signal some gradual development chances here. Nothing super high through the beginning of next week, but as we get later into next week and beyond, you'll see it is indicating that there's a chance that something could develop here, just not in a hurry at this point. So that's what we're going to be watching here. If you look at the GFS ensemble, you are going to see here some lowering of pressures in the Western Caribbean by next Monday, but nothing taking shape just yet. But as we take a look here at the latter part of next week, this would be next Thursday night, Friday morning, there are several solutions here showing tropical development centered on the Western Caribbean. So this is about 7-8 days away from now. As we move this along, we start to see that tracking generally to the north and west into this general direction. Now, there are some very strong solutions. I'm not going to show them all to you, but especially this one right here. There's also a lot of weaker solutions that are closer to the Yucatan. At this point, until something starts to form, we're just not going to know with a lot of confidence. But the window does open for something to maybe try to drift northward, and I would think Florida would be the place to watch. But certainly we have to watch the southern Gulf as well and maybe south of Louisiana. Texas here probably fine. But just something, if you're in Florida right now, just keep a note that there may be something later on that we're going to have to track here as we get to about the 18th to 22nd of October. The GFS operational has been showing us some clues that we may have a storm forming. You can see here in a week from today, we've got potentially a tropical depression or storm over the Western Caribbean. This would be on October 17th. And you can see it actually forms a hurricane and takes it towards the Yucatan and then into the southern Gulf of Mexico. After that, there's going to be high pressure building down this way and a trough, so it's probably going to protect Texas. So if we do have something over the southern Gulf, eventually it's got to come back into this direction here, northeast or even easterly. That's kind of like what we saw here with Milton, although a little bit different scenario. This model has gone back and forth quite a bit. You could see the run before had this system going into the southern Gulf and stalling and not going anywhere really, and eventually getting sheared apart. The run from before that had the system tracking into the similar area, but eventually getting pushed east by a stronger upper level feature and then pulling the system northward towards South Florida in 2 weeks. And this particular run, obviously very scary for South Florida, but it's not showing it run after run. It is showing that there will be a system here, but there's just a lot of different possible solutions. So right now, we really can't get too caught up in any one model run. We just have to kind of watch and see what might form. Here's a look at the Icon model. It too is showing low pressure developing, albeit a weaker system, towards next Thursday into early Friday. That here as well would be to the east of Nicaragua and Honduras. So again, it's got a while before it can form, but it is something that we should watch because we've seen it happen this time of year before. This was Hurricane Mitch from 1998, one of the most destructive storms on record in the Atlantic Basin. Unfortunately for Honduras and Guatemala, the system went in your direction a weekend, but a piece of it came out and eventually got picked up and moved into southwestern Florida, but it was a lot weaker. And then there's Hurricane Wilma, the one that Milton didn't quite beat, but got close to. That one avoided Central America and instead clipped the Yucatan and hit southwest Florida. We all remember that back in 2005. So again, just two examples. We're not going to say this is going to be like either of those yet, but it is kind of forming in the same time frame and in the same area as where this system could potentially form. So I thank you all for your time today. We're going to do fewer videos while we enjoy the quiet, just give everybody a chance to relax, help each other out here. But I expect to be back on here pretty regularly next week as we watch the Caribbean. As always, if you have not become a subscriber, I would appreciate it if you did and share with your friends. And feel free to leave a comment or two. Just be respectful. That's my only request of you. We want to keep this respectful. We're here to serve other folks. And I just appreciate your time. I will say this, I'm a Christian, and I close my videos with a quick word of encouragement, Christian encouragement, a little bit of a devotional. I am thanking God that I believe the prayers that we've had are working. I believe that God is coming through here because this storm could have been so much worse. I am a scientist, so I know that science is obviously something we study, and that is an explanation for why everything happens here. But I truly believe without God, we would never even be to the point where we can even study what he has created. And I believe that he has given us some mercy here with this storm, albeit it's a bad storm for Florida. It could have been so much worse. Imagine if this storm had gone up and hit north of Tampa. Imagine if it hadn't weakened. Imagine if it had slowed down. We'd be talking about a lot more rain, a lot more wind, and millions more people that could have been just completely out of a home. And while it is bad, in fact, my sister-in-law's family, had home damage and lost part of their home in it, and a lot of others have lost a lot. We still have each other. We still have our faith, and we praise God for that. Psalm 28:6, praise be to the Lord, for he has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord is my strength and my shield. My heart trusts in him, and he helps me. My heart leaps for joy, and with my song I praise him. The Lord is the strength of his people, a fortress of salvation for his anointed one. Save your people and bless your inheritance. Be their shepherd and carry them forever. And the prayers are working, folks. Continue to pray. This nation needs it. The world needs our prayer. God listens to these prayers. And I truly believe that he will continue to give mercy to those who have been hit hard with these powerful storms. He will continue to shine himself in the light in this dark situation. The enemy does not want us giving God any credit. He wants us to blame God for everything that we've gotten to. But the great part about it is that enemy has already been defeated through Jesus Christ, our Savior. And that is the encouragement I wanted to share with you all today. So I will catch up with you again soon, but I hope everybody stays safe, and we will talk soon. God bless.